you can get started.
Cool. Thank you so much, Donica. It's lovely to see you all, guys. That intro made me slightly embarrassed, but I think I have been kind of doing this for a while, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to come here and just kind of share, my knowledge and experience with you, and hopefully kind of give you some tips and tricks and answers to some of your questions that you might have towards the end. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to take you through a couple of slides. Some of this you guys probably already know. When I speak to my clients and the people that I work with, like, everybody's just so curious about the research and wants to learn. This is not like keto for weight loss or anything else like that. People are curious and they're digging into the research themselves, but hopefully this will all make sense to you. Hopefully it's not too technical, but if it is, you can just put some questions in the chat and we can get to them at the end. Okay, so can you see, Donica, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. All right, good stuff. So this is Integrative Ketogenic Research and Therapies. As Donica said, that's my private company. Now, if we skip along, I'm not going to go through this because Donica, you did a great job, but you can find my private practice at ikrt.org if you want to learn more about me or get in contact with me. And just to say that I don't receive any funding for my research, and I never have, so I'm not affiliated with any companies. So I'm actually just going to move your little faces out of the way so I can see my slides. There we go. So I wanted to kind of go over what ketogenic metabolic therapy is, because there are when you go online and you type in keto diet for mental health or just keto diet in general, there are so many different types of ketogenic diet, and it can be really confusing to try and figure out what constitutes a ketogenic diet, what's ketogenic metabolic therapy, other than a tongue twister, and what are we kind of talking about when we're talking about these therapies for mental health. There we go. You muted everybody. Now I'm unmuted. I'm special. No, it's all good. So when we think about the state of ketosis, this is a therapeutic nutritional intervention. Okay. And ketosis is what we're aiming for. We can access ketosis through many different forms. It doesn't have to be just through diet, but in this case, ketogenic metabolic therapy is the dietary approach. So this is not a ketogenic diet for weight loss. Okay, this is very different. As you all know, I think this has been told a million times already, the ketogenic diet, was created way back in the 1920s, and it's been used to treat treatment-resistant epilepsy in children for over 100 years. So we have a lot of evidence for the ketogenic diet, specifically a therapeutic ketogenic diet. And a lot of the mechanisms, we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, a lot of the mechanisms of epilepsy overlap with some mental health conditions like bipolar disorder, which is why we have this new field. So when it comes to the state of ketosis and reaching ketosis, this is relatively low risk and safe if implemented correctly. And if we compare this to other treatments and side effects of other treatments, this is quite a nice approach to take, especially if you want to do it adjunct to standard treatment. Because if you do it correctly and safely, you've got the right information, it can be relatively low risk and the rewards can be great. And so as a result of this, researchers have been getting together for the past 5-10 years, all in their silos initially doing the research, but have come together more recently to develop create this new field of metabolic psychiatry, which pulls together metabolism, metabolic health. When we think about that, we think about obesity, nutrition, type 2 diabetes, and so on. And then we bring together psychiatry and the treatment of psychiatric conditions, pull them together, and we have this new theory of mental health as a metabolic health issue. So on the right here, you can see, some of you have probably seen this before. We've got a couple of different breakdowns of different types of ketogenic diets. And I've put this here because I want to show you the difference between them. Ketogenic diet, fine, okay, but when we break it down, what does that mean? So the top left, we've got the classic ketogenic diet. This is what was used with children with epilepsy way back in the 1920s, even up to this day. And this is what we would call like a 4-to-1 approach, or a 4-to-1 ratio. And you can see that the fat percentage, that blue section there, is very, very high at 90%. And then the carbohydrates and proteins are quite small. And then you can compare that down to the bottom right-hand corner, the low glycemic index approach, where fats are, just about 45% of the diet, with proteins and carbohydrates taking up the rest. So you can see there's a huge variance. And this is where it gets tricky, when we're trying to help people to implement this. Where do we begin? Where do we start? Do we start with the top left, which is quite restrictive, or do we start with the bottom right? What's interesting is that all 4 of these approaches can give good results. The bottom right has been shown to be really good for people who have migraines, and then the top left for epilepsy, and the other 2, anything in between. So really, this is just to show that there's no one way of doing this, okay? And we're really looking to get into a state of ketosis, reach some certain ketone levels, and track how we're doing over time. Now, at the bottom, for all of you people who are curious about the research, you'll see the PMID. So this is the PubMed ID for certain papers that I've got this information from. So if you have a notepad or a pen and paper, you can jot these down if you want to go and read a little bit more about them. Okay, so why is this important? This is a search I did recently on the ketogenic diet and neurological diseases. Okay, so within neurological diseases, it encapsulates mental health conditions too, but it also includes things like autism and Alzheimer's disease and so on. You can see from about 1994 onwards, the amount of publications on ketogenic diets and neurological diseases has skyrocketed. And really what that's telling us is that we've got a bit of a problem. So this is no shock to you guys. We know 12% of people in the US were metabolically healthy before the pandemic. So before COVID, only 12%. We've got 1 billion people who have a mental health diagnosis. How many people do we have that are sub-threshold? Lots of people don't have diagnoses, right? But they've got all of those symptoms. And so that's still impacting their day-to-day life. So that number is likely a lot bigger. 30% of people who have major depressive disorder and bipolar disorder are treatment resistant. Okay, and for that population, what do we do? Right now, psychiatry doesn't have anything to offer people who are treatment resistant. However, ketogenic metabolic therapy is looking to actually, it's looking quite positive for those who are treatment resistant. Treatment resistant, I don't like the term. It just means that we haven't found something that works yet. And I think that they should remove that term and come up with something different. And then, of course, as we know, a lot of the medications, both physical health medications, but then also mental health medications, are metabolically damaging. So this is why these publications are growing exponentially, because we know that we have a problem and we need to figure out what to do about it. What's really cool, though, is we have a growing research base. Okay, so check this out. I'm going to go at full speed, right? Because I want to make sure I get through this in time. But we have so many clinical trials. We've got so many papers for lots of different conditions: schizophrenia, anorexia, bipolar disorder, all across the world, from Stanford all the way over to I think James Cook, Johns Cook in Australia. There's a ton of research going on right now, and lots of publications coming through. And for somebody who's been in this area for over 10 years, I have never seen it pick up like this in the past 2 years like it has. And it's very, very exciting, because on average, it takes about 17 years to get things from research into clinical practice, but we don't have 17 years to wait. Right? Because you guys are not feeling great day to day, or your family members are not feeling great day to day. So we can't hang around and wait for that research to get to the doctors to educate them for it to then be implemented into clinical practice. So we're kind of all speed ahead right now. We've got this really cool evidence base that's growing. We've got more than 12 clinical trials underway with these conditions. And a lot of this is thanks to the Bazooki Group and Metabolic Mind, which I'm sure you guys have heard of. If you haven't, check out metabolicmind.org. They're doing incredible work to try and give you up-to-date evidence as to how to actually implement this and do this safely. But they're also funding a lot of the research so that we can, we can train clinicians and teach them about this and who it works for and who it doesn't work for. So it's kind of time to be informed. So I want to take you on a little bit of a journey for, a little bit of my experience, because you're probably thinking, yes, Donica gave a very nice introduction, but like, who are you? Where did you come from? Where did you drop in from? And why are you even doing this research? Why are you here? So a long time ago, I was working on some inpatient psychiatric units in the east of London, in the UK, and I was on a night shift. And I was researching the ketogenic diet because I always had an interest in diets and nutrition and eating disorders. And usually during these night shifts, there are some patients kind of pottering around because they haven't gone to sleep. But then after about maybe 3 a.m., people have kind of have gone to bed, and you've got maybe like an hour or two where you might be able to get a bit of a break. So I was researching the ketogenic diet, and I saw that the ketogenic diet can regulate blood glucose levels and put type 2 diabetes into remission. So this is 10 years ago now, and this was the research that was coming through. And I thought, well, a lot of my patients on my ward have type 2 diabetes, or they have erratic blood glucose levels. This could help them. And then a lot of these studies were showing kind of secondary improvements in mood. Like there was just like one line in the paper that said, oh, their mood improved too, or, their well-being improved too. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I can help people on my ward that have type 2 diabetes. It might help their blood sugar levels, but it might also help their mood. Maybe it could even impact some of their symptoms and help that too. I wonder what else this diet can do. So I went off and I did my little researcher thing, and I came across this one study, and this one study changed my life. Donica knows this story very well. This is a story from a paper from 1965. So a long time ago, right? Sorry for anybody who was born before 1965, but this was a while ago. This is a pilot study of the ketogenic diet in schizophrenia. Now, what they noticed is, or they had research to show, I think it's way back from like the 1930s, so nearly 100 years ago as well, that people who had schizophrenia seemed to have dysregulated metabolism with carbohydrates. And I don't think many people know this. I think people think that that's just a new mechanism that's come up, but that's nearly 100 years old. And so they also noticed that people with schizophrenia, their carb cravings appeared to get worse before they had a psychotic episode. And so, like I said, there's been issues with utilization reported in 1958, but also way before that. So what they did was they took 10 females with chronic schizophrenia. They said treatment resistant. They tried everything. They continued their standard treatment. They're treatment resistant, so they weren't getting better. In 2 weeks, they had a significant decrease in symptoms and hallucinations and delusions in 2 weeks only. Now, for you guys who've been doing this for a while, you know that those first 2 weeks are a bit rubbish. They're not great. You feel fatigued and tired. And yet they had decrease in symptoms even in that time. And then 1 week after they discontinued the diet and they went back on their standard diet, 7 out of 10 of those patients had a return of their symptoms. And for people who were treatment resistant and nothing was working, for something like this to come along and decrease the symptoms and then have return when the diet went back to normal, I was dumbfounded. Yes, there's limitations. Okay, it's only 10 people. They're all female. Big whoop for the females because we never get put in research ever. But not many people, but I think we can all agree that that's something. I found something. So then I thought, okay, Where's the rest of the research? There's got to be more. It's been there since 1965. There's 1965. Nothing happened until 1994-ish. And even then, we don't have proper research until more recently. So pretty much we got nothing. Here's my cricket telling us nothing. So I thought to myself, I need to go and do this research because I think there's something behind this, and I think we can help people to implement this, and this could be really powerful, but I cannot do that if there's no research base. So I went off and I did a PhD. This is the title of my PhD, and there's the QR code, and you can find it at the bottom there. Very simply, what I did was I gathered a whole bunch of people, a couple hundred people. I put them on a ketogenic diet. I put some of them on a low carb diet and some of them on a control diet. And these were people who some had depression and some did not, classed as healthy. Okay. The publication of this is coming soon. But what I can share with you is this paper that you can go and you can check out. You can use that PMID at the bottom to look at it online. This is understanding the experiences of ketogenic metabolic therapy for people with depressive symptoms. Now, the nice thing about this paper is this is their words, right? I have not done anything to this data. This is their words and their experience of this approach for their depressive symptoms close to 7 years ago, back when this field didn't exist yet. People didn't know what the ketogenic diet was, really. They'd heard of Atkins, but not the ketogenic diet. So they were very much less biased, perhaps, than people are now, because people are looking to do ketogenic therapy for mental health. But have a look at this. This is what people were saying afterwards, and perhaps you guys have experienced this too. So sleeping better, struggled with insomnia, have done for a long time, but sleeping better. It's easy and a no-brainer. When I left work, my confidence was rock bottom, and now I feel like I'm coming back. My concentration's improving. I was drained before, but everything's so much better. My energy is better. And this one, for anybody who likes the band Blur, this quote I think is super, super powerful if you just give it a read. And I think it's quite funny because pork life better than park life is definitely the way to go. So people are showing even back then that there was something here. Okay, and so here's another example. This person was beginning to worry about not depression itself, but being in a rut, feeling pretty hopeless, not suicidal, just couldn't work out what was wrong with them. And then after, they felt a lot more positive overall, and they have focus on their objectives, and they have more of a positive outlook. Hopefully, a lot of you guys have experienced this, but for those of you that are just new, hopefully this is encouraging for you. The qualitative results, so what I've just showed you, you've got all of these increased self-esteem, motivation, positive outlook, control, well-being. And then, of course, you've got the physical improvements that we kind of push to the wayside now, but are extremely important, like weight loss, hunger and cravings reduced, pain medication reduced, and so on. So there's definitely something here. But what are other people finding? You guys, I know a lot of you are probably on Twitter or on Instagram, so you're seeing these studies when they come through. These are some of the research results of some of the big trials. You know, we've got 43% clinical remission. 10% of their body weights come down, happy days, 75% having a clinically meaningful improvement. This is exciting. We want to know who it doesn't work for, but it does seem to be working for a lot of people. This paper, you guys may have come across as well. This took 28 people who were in hospital with a mixture of diagnosis, put them on a ketogenic diet, and 100% of people improved in their symptoms. And these inpatients were classed as treatment resistant as well. This new pilot trial in bipolar and schizophrenia, 79% had that clinically meaningful improvement that I mentioned, 10% average weight loss, which is actually better than the new gastric band after 4 months. So one could say, wait, you should maybe check out the ketogenic diet and ketogenic therapy first if you can. But again, look at those quotes. This worked far better than the lamotrigine ever did. And I think a lot of you can probably attest to that, right? This antidepressant effect, this mood stabilizing effect. Here's another one, a remission of depression and anxiety, complete remission of depression and anxiety, and some quotes from people too. Okay, that's fine in a controlled setting, in an RCT, you know, in the research. What about in clinical practice? What about the real world? Well, if we have a look here, on the left and the right, we've got two different clients of mine, befores and afters. Now, the PHQ-9 and the GAD-7 that you see, they are just two measures of depression and anxiety. And this is how people kind of diagnose people with depressive symptoms and anxiety. So on the left, you can see this lady, she did this was taken at 9 weeks. So in the beginning, she had mild and moderate depression and anxiety. And after 9 weeks, she had no depression and minimal anxiety. And whether that's a clinically meaningful result or not, it is based on the amount of points dropped. So if this was a medication, if this was an antidepressant or an antipsychotic and it was tested, it would be deemed as working. On the right, after 4 weeks, we have somebody who had moderate to severe depression, very high scores, and severe anxiety. And in 4 weeks, both of those were down to moderate levels. And again, clinically meaningful improvement. So if it was a drug, it would be classed as working. And that's only after 4 weeks, right? That's nothing. You've got the whole keto flu situation to get through first, right? So this is really, really powerful for some people. Okay, what are the mechanisms? This is tricky. Lots of people ask me, how does this work? How does this work for my condition? How does this work for me? And it's a really difficult answer to give, and we just do not know. When I did my research, I came across 53 mechanisms by which depression acts and 53 mechanisms by which ketones counteract the depression. So that was 53 mechanisms. And then I stopped because I was doing a psychology research project, not a biochemistry research project. And so if we took a year to look at each of those mechanisms, we're going to be waiting a really, really long time. Okay, which is why it's important for us to go ahead and implement this in the real world safely and effectively now so that people can get relief rather than waiting. Meanwhile, top researchers are looking at the mechanisms. What we do know, okay, is that we have an overlap in how epilepsy works and how bipolar works. A lot of the medications used in epilepsy are also used in bipolar disorder off-label for mood stabilization and mood elevation. So that's interesting. You know, maybe there's some shared mechanisms there. In depression, specifically, atypical depression. Atypical depression, the characteristics are increased hunger, increased weight, increased cravings, metabolic syndrome. So for people with atypical depression, this can come right in and this can really improve the metabolic health of the individual and reduce those depression levels. And then I'm sure, as you all know, and if you haven't read the book, I definitely recommend it, the book Brain Energy by Dr. Chris Palmer. Essentially what we have at the core, this theory of brain energy insufficiency. In other words, our mitochondria, the batteries in our cells, they are unhappy, they are sad, they are broken, and they are not getting fixed, and therefore they do not work in the way that they should. And that then comes out or shows itself in mental health conditions and physical health conditions. So when we think about the root causes of mental illness and we think, look, kind of scour the research and try and pull it all together to see what people can actually agree on, we've got a couple. We've got 6, actually. It's more than a couple. So we've got brain glucose hypometabolism. Pretty pleased I can say that. I always get it wrong. It's a bit of a tongue twister. What this essentially means is the glucose and the sugar is getting up to the brain to provide energy to the brain, but the brain cannot utilize it. It can see it, it knows historically what to do with it, but it cannot, for some reason, utilize that glucose for energy. And that then causes the brain to be sluggish and sad and cannot do what it needs to do. It's like putting the wrong petrol into your car. Then we have neurotransmitter imbalances. This theory's been around for a long time, that, you know, serotonin and dopamine sometimes is an imbalance for one reason or another. We still don't know why. We still don't know how. We also still don't know if this is actually true, but this is what people think. Oxidative stress. In other words, our environment, our kind of toxic environment, our food, or the clothes we're wearing, the soaps we're using, and so on. A lot of this can cause damage to our cells, and this produces oxidative stress. Inflammation, you're probably all familiar with. Inflammation is often, actually, I think inflammation probably has the most research on it in terms of being tied to mental health conditions. Insulin resistance, which you all know, like metabolic syndrome, obesity, type 2 diabetes. And then finally, mitochondrial dysfunction. So the batteries in our cells are sad, unhappy, and broken, and that then causes a whole host of issues further down the line. Okay, so where do we go with this? This is like, well, which one do I have? Like, is my root cause number 3, or is my root cause number 6, or is it a mixture of all of them? Does it matter if you have something that can help all of those? Because even when we think about our treatments, a lot of those medications have negative metabolic side effects on top of whatever is your root cause. And that's completely overwhelming. But the ketogenic diet and ketogenic therapy, there is research to show that it can improve every single one of those root causes. Every single one. So instead of spending so much time trying to figure out what the root cause is, because even the research isn't certain, what you can do is implement safely and effectively ketogenic therapy to target all of those. Okay, and then hopefully you will start to see some relief. Now, I have to say, this is not a cure-all. You guys know this, okay? Especially if you've been doing it for a really long time. It's not a cure-all or a standalone treatment, right? But it's rather a piece of the larger puzzle. I like to look at it as a fundamental part of recovery and mental health, but there are definitely other things that need to happen too, and they will come with time. Here's my pyramid, okay? So I say this to everybody that I work with. Strong metabolic foundation is what you're looking for. And we do that by using ketogenic metabolic therapy to improve your overall metabolic health, physical, mental, and so on. Then the next stage is the other metabolic therapies. Once you've got one sorted, then you bring in things like light, movement, sleep, connection, and you focus on those. And then together you have a very, very strong foundation. And then finally, once you've done that, then you have a look and see, well, what symptoms are residual? What's kind of hanging around that hasn't got better? You know, do I still have some symptoms? Do I have some gut issues? That's when you go and you seek treatment or alternative therapies for those ongoing issues. But hopefully by that time, you've already improved a lot of your symptoms with 1 and 2. Rather than just taking in some standard treatments that come in on top of perhaps your standard American diet or standard UK diet and your poor sleep, poor movement, poor light, and so on. So how to begin? I didn't know, Donica, if what the kind of spread was here of people, but I'm assuming you guys, some of you have been doing this for ages and some of you are probably just curious and haven't started. So I wanted to just give a little bit on how you begin, because the term ketogenic therapy is a bit weird. Why does it have a K in it? It doesn't really make much sense. It's a little bit, it's a little bit scary. Okay, and especially with how mainstream media portrays it. So I wanted to kind of make it really simple and say that I don't want people to be overwhelmed, and that there are benefits from simply cleaning up your diet. So removing your ultra processed foods as the first step. If you do nothing more than that, you may still see benefits. Okay, your blood sugar levels will start to level out. Then, if you've still got symptoms, a low carbohydrate diet might be the next step. And you can do that safely for a long period of time, no problem. And then if you've still got symptoms, then you might move to a therapeutic ketogenic diet, medical keto, whatever the term is that you've come across, not a keto diet for weight loss, but very much more therapeutic range, then you'd move to that. Ideally with guidance and support if funds allow. I know that's a bit rich coming from me because I have a private practice and I work with people to do this, right? So I understand there is a little bit of a conflict there. However, in my PhD research, which I was not funded to do, I paid for myself before I even had a private practice, my research showed that the people who had accountability and support, even in an environment like what you have here, Donica, and all of you guys, the people that had the accountability and support were able to do this long term. The people that did not have accountability and support, they dropped out because it was too difficult for them. So accountability and support and guidance in any way that you can, or even a combination of lots of different ways, is absolutely imperative, and it's going to make your life so much easier, especially if you've got people who are also doing it at the same time as you. That's even better because you can share stories and so on, and you can get support that way. Okay, so that's it. I've run through my slides super quick because I want to get to your questions. But if you want to reach out to me or if you want to follow me or anything like that, you can do that by taking down these details. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and then I'll hand it back over to you, Donica, and we can go through some questions together. But thank you for listening to me for a good part of half an hour. And I'm excited to get to your questions now.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Erin. This was just such a well-structured, high-end, straight to the point, valuable information. I am just thrilled the way you put it, like so easy to understand and so well backed up by the science. Amazing. So thank you. And yes, I don't want to take up too much time, but I know we had some people submitted questions before the event, so I definitely won't have time to go through all of them, but I also want to give an opportunity to the people who are here. If you have a question, definitely feel free to raise your hand, and we still have about 20 minutes. We'll do our best to do that, like first come, first serve. And so, Erin, the first question that I have is from somebody who's been doing keto for 3 months now and lost significant weight without without tracking macros diligently. But she's now noticing ketones getting increasingly smaller and smaller. So her question is adding fat and decreasing protein the fix, or are there other tactics? She's saying that she's doing keto for mental health and she's increasingly below the therapeutic range. And just a quick disclaimer, I think everyone has agreed to that and have a clear understanding. We cannot provide, obviously, this is just not meant to be a personal advice. But if you, Erin, would just share maybe what a general perspective on this, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. None of this is medical advice, but it's definitely this is a great question, actually, because I think this happens for a lot of people and I've seen it a ton. Ketones can decrease after a couple of months of being in ketosis consistently. So like if you were getting, 3 millimole or 2.5 millimole every day, after a while that can go down and you don't feel any difference, just the ketones look different. And then people freak out because they're like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? And so there is a mechanism behind this in that after a while, your body realizes how many ketones.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. So after a while, your body realizes that you only need to make X amount of ketones. You don't need as much as you had before. You become more efficient, and therefore you see the ketones drop. and that's completely normal. However, we know that to be true, but we can't say that that's happening for certain. Most likely it might be something else. And really, the biggest thing that I see is carb creep, where after a couple of months, especially if people are not tracking diligently, like that person said, some carbs might be sneaking in, even if it's, even if it's more vegetables or something in drinks, etc. So if anybody has this, I would say go back and actually track for maybe 2 weeks and just see, are you actually staying below 20 grams? And then what do your ketones look like at that point? If they are below 20 grams and you're definitely, you've got your ketones are not going up, then it might be just that natural decrease, but it's likely some sneaky carbs in there, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Mhm.
So the next question is someone who is enrolled in a Bachelor of Applied Nutrition, and I think another very common thing. So she was told by a professor that the ketogenic diet causes cardiovascular disease, and that the brain doesn't like ketones and can only use them for a limited amount of time. So her question is there any validity to any of those concerns from your research and knowledge? And if not, what is the best approach to change people's minds so that ketogenic therapy can become a mainstream treatment for mental illness, which is something I think we're all hopeful for?
Yeah. So yeah, I think this one does come up a lot too. I think Metabolic Mind has actually done some really good videos specifically on this. Dr. Bretcher has addressed them. So check them out for a more detailed answer, especially because he's a cardiologist. There is no research that I know of to show that the ketogenic diet causes cardiovascular disease, because cardiovascular disease develops over time, over decades. And so unless somebody's been on a ketogenic diet since birth, we can't say that one thing caused the other. Just like with other research, we can't say for sure that XYZ in humans causes cancer. We might be able to see it in Petri dishes and so on, but we can't say for certain, this person developed cancer because of XYZ. It is not kind of cause and effect. The brain, however, can run on both ketones and glucose, right? But research shows that the brain runs more efficiently on ketones. It's a cleaner fuel to use. And the brain and body can actually create its own glucose when needed, in order to keep your blood glucose levels stable. So, and that's even when we're sleeping, the body can do that. And so it's not something that I would be worried about in terms of how we change people's minds. Again, we just need to continue publishing research like we're doing, across lots of different conditions, a mixture of conditions. But then also, because that takes a while to get into real life, we need to teach people about eating real food. Because if you think about the ketogenic diet in its simplicity, like just the diet itself, it is just non-processed real food. It's not a processed medical food that you have to take in order to feel better, or a medication that's been created to make you feel better. It's just simply food that is found on this planet, right? Maybe with mild processing for cheese and cream, but that's it. And we need to help people to understand that that's not dangerous, and that's okay. And actually, that's really good. That's how we should be eating, fundamentally. So I think a little bit of both.
Yeah, yeah, and I so agree with that. And I think that's what Dr. Georgia E talks a lot about, right? Like even just, and you mentioned it too, that even just removing the ultra processed foods is going to have some sort of improvement, like depending on how much you need. But for some people, just that. And I remember for myself, I started with the Whole30 diet. That's just what I found, and it made sense. We just eliminated anything processed, right? Just
Right.
that really gave me the hope that, oh my gosh, this is helping. So what's the next thing? Just like as you listed it, eliminate processed foods, then switch to lower carb, and then potentially go to keto. But yeah, I
Exactly.
agree and love that.
Mhm.
Okay, and then I'm gonna read one more from the pre-submitted questions. It is for the ladies on keto, is there a change in keto metabolism around and during menstruation? Which I think is also a common question.
Yeah. So us poor women, we just don't get in that research. It's getting better, but we're just not in that research enough. So there's not so much a change in keto metabolism per se. Like the ketones are still doing their job. They're still doing what they need to do. But if you look at our cycle, a female cycle is like 28 to 32 days long, and we've got lots of different hormones that are coming up and going down over that time, compared to you guys, where you're all running on a 24-hour cycle and it's a little bit different, right? So with those hormones going up and down, hormones can also raise and bring up and bring down glucose levels. And so what we actually do know for sure is that kind of 4 to 7 days before your cycle starts, so before your period begins, you're in that luteal phase, and you will find that actually your glucose levels are higher naturally because of the way your hormones are. And if your ketones are up, or if your glucose is up, then your ketones come down because they work a little bit on a seesaw. And so what that means is when your glucose goes up, what do you have? You've got more hunger and more cravings because you don't have the appetite suppressing effects of the ketones unless your ketones are super high. So you're more hungry, you're more irritable because you're more hungry, most likely. And research actually shows that it's not so much for carbohydrate. The cravings are for carbohydrates because you want quick energy. But if you just eat more food on those days and you reduce your output, so maybe you do less intense workouts, do more yoga and slow things, then actually you can get through that period fine without needing to increase carbohydrates. So maybe that's the time where you have some 95% Lindt chocolate, like a couple extra carbs, but then you've got some like maybe some cream or some extra cheese or something like that to have some extra calories so that you are not hungry. So it's not really a change in keto metabolism, but it's just how the hormones work with your ketone and glucose levels.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and whoever wants to learn more about that, I think Dr. Mindy Pels has an amazing source of information on her website. She also has a book that talks specifically on that. And then I'm gonna switch over to the people who have submitted questions in the chat. So Daniela is asking, what improvements can we expect and when can we expect it to happen? So she's treating major depression, started keto 2 weeks ago, and her levels are between 1 and 1.5. So her question is, what should be the ketone levels to start seeing an improvement?
Yeah, this is why the answer to this question is the reason why this is not yet a therapy for people. It's not yet, you can't just go onto an app and just follow the instructions and then you're done, because it really depends on the diagnosis, but then also, have you met somebody with the same diagnosis as you that has exactly the same symptoms? Probably not. So it then also depends on your symptoms and then also your lifestyle and the medications you're on. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. So in order to bring this back up, what we can say is anxiety levels seem to improve sooner than depression, but depression does seem to be kind of like a slow trend up, but I would definitely give it 3 to 6 months for you to see that, because also sometimes things might get worse before they get better. And if you've had depression for a really long time, there might also be some habits that you are accustomed to that also kind of play into that. So it's difficult for you to tell day to day if things are improving. What I would do is log how you're feeling every day so that you can look back at the end of the week or the end of the month to see, is this working? Maybe like on a scale of 1 to 5, how you're feeling. In terms of ketones, if your ketones are up around 1.5, that's great. There's some of the research shows that at 0.8, people can see improvements in depression. And then more so for the bipolar research, it's kind of between 1 to 3. What I say to people is get yourself between 1 and 3. And then if you only needed 0.8, well, you're at 1. So, you're going to have ketones plus. So get yourself between 1 and 3 and then track and see how you're doing over a period of time. what I want to say for everybody is, for some people, it takes longer than 3 months. And people, because we've looked at the research or we've looked at the videos online, and everybody that's excited about this goes online and says, yeah, like my delusions and everything went away in like 2 weeks. They're all the good stories. Okay. But then there's a zillion other people who are doing it where it takes longer. And I sometimes have people that get frustrated because they're like, I haven't had full remission in 3 months. And I'm like, well, we shouldn't be setting that as the expectation anyway. We are healing metabolism, and that takes time. So if you haven't seen something full at 3 months, keep going, because it's definitely improving physical metabolic health, and I'm sure it will be doing something for your mental health as well. So that was just a little bit of a side thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. But I just want to double click on the thing that you mentioned to track your symptoms, because I have also seen that so many times when people improve slowly. And again, it's going to depend on where you're coming from. And if it has been decades of unhealthy ways of eating and patterns that are not supporting metabolism, it's going to take a while. But people can quickly forget how much worse it was as they progress. And tracking down can be so beneficial in those cases, tracking those symptoms and being able to look back and then realize, after the third month, how much progress have you made? And even if it's not the whole picture, it doesn't mean it's not working, right? Like, it's just so individual, but
yeah, one of the
eventually, oh,
sorry, I was going to say, one of the things I like to do is, even for people that have already started, if you can now, like today, tomorrow, or over the weekend, write down in your notes app or somewhere all the symptoms of before you started this that you had, physical and mental, and like what a typical day looked like and how you were feeling. Because just like you said, Donica, you're going to forget about that. Like, once you're starting to feel good, hey, you don't care, you're feeling good. But it's also good to look back and say, oh, well, actually, I don't have that anymore. I don't have that anymore. That's improved. Wow, I actually do go to the shop on my own in the daylight, and I can do that, whereas I used to go out at night so people didn't see me before. So that's improved. So I would recommend people do that, because you can just look back and then see how far you've come.
yeah, absolutely. Amazing. And I know we're getting closer to the 1 hour mark, so unfortunately we won't get to all of the questions, but I really appreciate your input. It's such a valuable information. And what I'm really excited to hear and curious to hear from you is your perspective on how this whole movement of metabolic psychiatry is going to progress. I'm just curious, where do you see it going? Is it realistic to hope that it can be a first-line treatment offered to people? And like, and if so, what is your forecast? Like, how long would it take us to get there? And obviously, that's just our own subjective thoughts, but since you are so involved in this, I think it's just good for us to hear it from you.
Absolutely. I mean, just last week, the Bazooki group brought lots of the clinicians and researchers from around the world together to discuss exactly this. And so I can say without shadow of a doubt that we have got more research in the past 2 years than we have in the past 10. And so that's, like, if we go at that pace, we're gonna get there pretty quickly. But also, we have a lot of researchers and clinicians around the world working on this right now. And for once in our life, we actually have funding. Psychiatry has been horrendously underfunded forever, right? But now there is funding specifically into this. The people behind this are also extremely passionate. People haven't come into this area on purpose. Everybody's just kind of ended up here by accident because they're curious or they have lived experience. And so that mixture of passion and then that focus, finally, with the money focused on the RCTs and such, I think we're going to get there. Well, we're definitely going to get there much quicker than we would have beforehand. I don't know how long that's going to take, but things are moving fast. Whether or not it's going to be a first-line treatment anytime soon, I don't know, because we need to train the new generation of psychiatrists to understand that this can be, once we have the research, that this can be a viable treatment option. And that takes time, because older generations need to move on before the new generations come through. Okay. But what we can also do at the same time that is not dangerous by any stretch is we can do adjunct. So everybody, it should be that everybody who has a diagnosis gets offered this as an adjunct treatment to treat the metabolic side effects of the medications that people are taking, but also then have the therapy, have all the different therapies, but have this also as an option. And I believe that that is coming much sooner than we think. I would say within the next 10 years, that's definitely, I would see that that would be a thing. In terms of the UK, you know, we have a different system, medical system to the US. So we have a national health service where, you know, people don't pay privately for their healthcare. And my goal in the UK is to get kind of some sort, it can't be cookie cutter, right? Because that doesn't work, but some sort of program into the NHS that is available for people for free on the National Health Service, where they can do this and start to see benefits. And again, I think with that maybe 5-7 year timeline, that could work. We need a lot of peer support workers. We need a lot of people like you guys who have felt better and want to pay it forward to get involved so that we can make this happen. But I do think the next 5 to 10 years are going to be groundbreaking really for this. But as an adjunct, we can get it sooner. As a first line treatment, it will take a little bit longer.
Yeah, yeah. And that's still quite, you know, quite good. Like it sounds very hopeful and so powerful. And what I love about it is that it puts the person who is doing it in charge. So they now have a saying. That's so important. Not, it just gives you also that feeling of having that personal responsibility, being able to support yourself, not just, I think it's pretty huge. And I'm excited also to share your forecast and like how soon we can get this moving because it's working and people are talking about it. And it has been working like nothing else before. So that's quite.
What we need, and this is it's a call out for all of you. What we need, and the only way we're actually going to do it is with a grassroots movement, just like the type 2 diabetes and ketogenic diet grassroots movement that started in 2014. It's doing really well. We can follow the same trajectory. I've been saying this for a while, follow the same trajectory, but we need every single one of you who this is working for or it's helped in some way, shape, or form to really get behind this and tell other people about it. Don't wax lyrical, right? People will get fed up, okay? But if people are interested in wondering like what you've been doing, then share it with them. Because eventually, if a psychiatrist has 5 patients come and ask about ketogenic therapy for mental health, they can't ignore it. They will be doing an injustice to their patient if they ignore that. So they will have to sit up and listen and do something about it. But that can only happen if all of you guys share far and wide and start talking and demanding and asking for it because you should be given it. And so therefore, yeah, it is a call out to all of you and everybody else that joins this group in the future to help with that grassroots movement.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Erin. And if people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yes, you can find me on my very complicated website, which is ikrt.org, or you just put my name into Google and you'll find me. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, all the usual places, but ikrt.org is my website, and you can email me there and get in contact too.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I and everyone here, I'm sure, really appreciate your time, your wisdom, the amazing information. Thank you. Thank you for all the contributions that you're doing, for your continuous work in the field. It really matters. And yeah, we'll hope to continue interacting and learning more from each other. And yeah, we'll keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so nice to share this with all of you. And thank you for your questions and for joining in the middle of the day. And I'll speak to you all soon. Take care, everyone.
Good. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.